very skeptical of is that any state of meditation, for example, can result in clairvoyance or telekinesis or telepathy.
We are not talking about clairvoyance, we are not talking about telepathy, please use the telephone. There are death rituals. We are doing these things to distance ourselves from our parentage. Because if the influence of parental genetics are too heavy on us, we will not be a fresh life, we will just be a copy.
If that happened, I would believe that consciousness can survive death of the brain. That has never happened, and I'd be willing to bet a lot of money that it never will.
Science should never conclude what we do not know cannot exist. That'll not be a good thing to do.
Nor should we make up stuff for which we have no reason to believe it exists.
Albert Einstein once famously said, "There are only two ways to live your life. One is as though nothing is a miracle. The other is as though everything is a miracle." This quote perfectly sets the stage for this debate: is consciousness a miracle? In today's discussion, Sadhguru advocates the view that consciousness is indeed a miracle, embodying the wonder and complexity of existence. On the other hand, Dr. Steven Pinker provides a contrasting perspective, suggesting a more grounded or scientific approach to understanding consciousness. It's important to clarify that the primary focus of this debate is not to define what is consciousness, but to explore the intriguing question of, is consciousness a miracle? However, as the conversation unfolds, both the speakers will naturally share their insights into the nature of consciousness itself. We believe this debate is of historic significance and will remain relevant and impactful for centuries to come, offering profound insights into the human understanding of life. Let's now dive right into it.
Is consciousness a miracle? No, and here's why. Consciousness consists of patterns of activity in the brain. We can be a bit more specific, but I won't go into detail, but there's reason to think that it can be specified as rhythmic, synchronized patterns of activity, perhaps in the gamma range or higher, involving loops between the thalamus, prefrontal cortex, parietal cortex, and other brain regions. Why do we think that? Well, findings in neuroscience that go back almost a century or more. My compatriot, Dr. Wilder Penfield, a Montreal neurosurgeon, there's a street named after him now, found that during neurosurgery, when the brain was exposed, part of the skull removed, and as we all know, the brain has no pain receptors, so that brain surgery can be done while the patient is conscious. And he found that when he stimulated the cortex with an electrode, he could cause the patient to have a vivid, lifelike experience. They could think that they were at their 8-year-old birthday party, for example. So electricity causes consciousness, not a miracle. Drugs affect consciousness. That's why we take mood-altering drugs, or whether recreational or therapeutic. So chemistry causes consciousness. If a part of the brain is removed through surgery because of a tumor, through a head injury or a stroke, then a part of consciousness is affected, and the person may lose the experience of seeing color or recognizing objects or even envisioning themselves at some future time, depending on where the lesion is. This is not just a correlate, but we know that the intact brain wiring is necessary for consciousness. It's not just two things happening at the same time, because if a part of the brain is damaged, the person no longer has the corresponding experience, and say if the optic nerve is cut, the person's blind. We also know that if we allow the brain to function normally, that the patterns of activity that correspond to consciousness are increasingly capable of being read, that any conscious experience has a corresponding brain signature, and through functional magnetic resonance imaging and machine learning, we're getting closer and closer to being able to read out someone's consciousness from their pattern of brain activity. Again, not a miracle. It's patterns of electromagnetic signatures from blood flow. All of these are physical entities and picked up by a very strong magnet, another physical entity, and we can see what the person is thinking. You might be skeptical that the brain as a physical object is capable of supporting consciousness, given how mind-bogglingly, intricately complex human thought, perception, emotion is. And indeed, if we opened up the skull and it was filled with spam, then you might say that consciousness really is a miracle. But it's not filled with spam. It's filled with tissue that is certainly commensurate in its complexity to the complexity of consciousness. 86 billion neurons, possibly 100 trillion synapses. What a neural network like that is capable of is of stupendous complexity, as we are reminded by the progress in artificial intelligence. Based on what are sometimes called artificial neural networks, that is, it is possible by interconnecting circuits with some of the properties of brain tissue to duplicate or at least approximate many of the feats of human intelligence and consciousness.
Okay, so the first part of Dr. Steven Pinker's argument shows that from his perspective and that of neuroscience, consciousness is essentially a byproduct of neural activity within the brain. This conclusion has been reached through extensive studies and observations of brain activity in various individuals. According to this viewpoint, consciousness emerges from the functions of the brain. Therefore, nothing miraculous about it. Now let's see Sadhguru's first argument in this debate.
Same things can be looked from many different directions. First of all, what is a miracle? If you put filth in the soil, it becomes a miracle. If you put a piece of bread into this becomes a complex human body. This is a miracle. This is one way of looking at it. When we say a miracle, when what we see, the phenomena that we see is not easily available to a logical process, we say this is miraculous. Of course, the word miracle has been taken to another place by religious groups and stuff, but essentially, in human experience, a miracle means, you saw yesterday you planted a seed and today it's become a beautiful flower, it's miraculous. Because you can, of course, there is somebody there who can explain exactly how filth became a flower, how a stinking filth became a fragrant flower, can be explained, but not easily available to human logic, so we say this is miraculous. Calling something miraculous does not mean it is not available to any reason. Calling something miraculous essentially means we appreciate the magic of life. Well, our parents gave us, very stingy people, they gave us only one cell each. Hello? They could have given us 1,000,000 and made life easy, but they gave us only one, and here we are sitting talking all this. This is a miracle. Well, we can always talk about how cells multiplied, what happened, this. But you can't do this in a drum, you can't put this in a barrel and do this. So this is a miraculous process that it's happening. So one way of looking at it is you can explain everything about life. Another way is just everything in life is magical and miraculous. If we're talking about a human being conscious right now, that all of you are conscious in that sense, that is, yes, you're conscious. Only Bala can throw you off by using his magic of anesthetics. That is conscious, human beings being conscious. Of course, if you're not conscious, there's nothing here for you. But consciousness, an English word consciousness doesn't really represent that, but generally we think we are talking about an intelligence beyond our own intellect, which is functioning within us right now. When I say functioning, well, you can explain the physical process of many things, but a piece of bread doesn't look like you, feel like you, nor does it have your intelligence, but if you put it inside, in some way it becomes you. This is a miraculous and conscious process of consciousness. See, first of all, human mind, this brain-centric approach, we don't look at it that way. We see as there is a physical body, there is a mental body. When I say a mental body, Every cell in your body has enormous memory, far more memory than your brain can ever hold, because this remembers how your forefathers were 1,000,000 years ago. It's not forgotten a thing, even the skin texture, it's not forgotten to that extent. So every cell in the body carries enormous memory, and the kind of functions that it is doing is unbelievable. So it has intelligence and it has memory. Essentially, in human understanding, what we call as mind is a certain combination of memory and intelligence, so that is spread right across the system. Whether human beings have learned to use that or no, because this whole thing about in the today's modern education process, we are made to believe only thought is intelligence. No, our thought is rudimentary because it's only functioning from the little data that we have collected. The data that I have collected, how much ever I have collected, it is still minuscule in this cosmos. It is like in the morning also we were talking about this, if I give you a 1,000,000,000,000-piece jigsaw, if you put 5 pieces together, you say this is a bear. If you get 8, you will say this is an elephant. If you get 12, you will say this is a dinosaur. If you get 15, maybe you will call it a whale, I don't know. Just arriving at conclusions every time we get a piece of information is not the way to conclude about what we are referring to as consciousness. Being conscious, you being conscious, let's use different words so that there is a distinction. Right now, let's say you're aware, I'm just replacing the word conscious, replacing the word conscious with being aware, you're aware. In the yogic sciences, we call this prajna. You are right now prajna. If you fall asleep, you are not conscious or you're not aware. Let's use the word awareness to make a distinction. But beyond intellect, this intellect, how it functions is operated by what we are identified with. Depending upon what we are identified with, accordingly the intellect veils itself. Right now, people are fighting for nationhood, people are fighting for religion, people are fighting for race, people are fighting for whatever they believe in, simply because they're identified with it, and in their intellect, this says, this is the way. There are no two ways about it. Two groups of people or two individuals, when they're quarreling, both of them believe this is it, otherwise they won't risk their life. Hello? When somebody pitches their life for something, you must believe that it matters to them and they believe that's it. Unfortunately, it is just that it is your identity which makes you use your intelligence in this form. So, there are various dimensions of memory which plays out through this identity. Beyond this, there is an intelligence which is unsullied by memory. This is what we refer to as chitta, and generally that's what I would understand as consciousness. What we are referring to as consciousness is that which is the very basis of our creation. Well, somebody may call it God, it's up to them because they're trying to personalize that in their life. Because they can't relate to anything which is not in a human form, they're saying that. But there are so many people of Indian origin here, they have man god, they have woman god, they have cow god, they have snake god, they have monkey god, they have every crawling, creeping, every kind. Because according to wherever they were living, they made that into their god. Essentially, what they are looking for is personification of the source of what is happening. Because we cannot explain this source, because logically we cannot conclude, the only way is to experience. How will you experience? What are the different ways to experience? There are 4 aspects in yoga. This is called as karma, kriya, jnana, bhakti. What this means is, these are 4 dimensions of your existence. You have a physical body, so through action you can realize certain things. You have an intelligence. Through your intelligence you can realize certain things. If you realize through your action, we call this karma yoga. If you realize through your intelligence, we call this jnana yoga. If you realize through your emotion, we call this bhakti yoga, yoga of devotion or emotion. If you realize by transforming your inner energies, we call this kriya yoga. These are the only 4 things you can do no matter what you do, whether you do religion or you do intellectual stuff, you do education, you do devotion, you do whatever. You can use your body or your mind or your emotion or your energy. This is all that's happening, these 4 things. All these 4 are pathways. But at the same time, is there anybody here who is just one big body and don't have a mind or don't have an emotion or energy? No, we are a combination of these four things. Why are we so different? Because we are a unique combination of these four things. In one person, the body may be dominant, in another person, their emotions may be dominant, in another person, their intellect may be dominant. Each person has a different mix of the same things, but these four things are the possibility of knowing. So what we are referring to as consciousness is that aspect of creation which is intelligent but unsullied by memory. Without memory, it doesn't have an intent, it doesn't manifest. Without memory, it doesn't have a direction, it's just there. If it finds little memory, it finds expression. Oh, where is the proof? Well, I am the proof. Because if you want to prove everything with logical steps, as I said, logic is the foundation of our living here, but foundation is not the place to live. So, first of all, if we separate what is awareness and what is consciousness, I think a lot of these different opinions will go away. About a miracle, well, those who want to enjoy their life, appreciate life and really experience life, they will look everything from a magical eye. Those who want to dissect life, they will look at it from a logical aspect of life. It's not a question of right and wrong, it's just two different ways of doing the same thing.
Okay, so according to Sadhguru, in the first part of his argument, consciousness is not merely a brain activity. Rather, it transcends physical nature. This perspective challenges the current scientific understanding of consciousness. Sadhguru introduces the concept of chitta from yoga, suggesting it as the foundation of life, with consciousness being synonymous with chitta. Another intriguing point he raises is the distinction between awareness and consciousness, suggesting that what Dr. Pinker refers to as consciousness might more accurately be termed as awareness. Sadhguru emphasizes that his insights into consciousness are derived from his personal experience.
And I will speak to you, Sadhguru. You are, when it comes to turning seeds into edible food, we know that many civilizations, when there was a crop failure, when there was a drought, when there was a famine, when locusts came and ate the grain, they would utter prayers, they would sacrifice a goat, sometimes they would sacrifice a virgin, they would pray for a miracle. Fortunately, you don't do that. You quite admirably have a foundation that literally gets your hands dirty. There's nothing miraculous about dirt. And you have my admiration for taking dirt seriously, because the transformation of a seed into a stalk of wheat is not a miracle. It depends on having the right dirt. And hats off to you for taking dirt seriously. Likewise, if you have the miracle of a child, and the child has a disease like leukemia, you could pray to a saint, you could climb up the stairs of a cathedral on your knees, you could set up a shrine, you could, as we say, pray for a miracle. That would be, I would submit, an immoral thing to do, knowing that there are ways of keeping that miracle of a child in existence by giving it the right drug that would get rid of the leukemia or cure the infection. And so even treating a child as a miracle, even treating a plant as a miracle, metaphorically, poetically, when it actually comes to action, to the need to do something to perpetuate this miracle, it is very important not to take the miracle language literally, but rather to see it as a matter of cause and effect, to worry about rainfall and soil and fertilizer and farming practices, to worry about the child's health, the appropriate drugs, the appropriate nutrition, the appropriate loving environment. Now, when it comes to consciousness, this is true even more significantly. So, Bala, you're a professor of anesthesia, you're an anesthesiologist, so you manipulate people's consciousness. I assume not with prayers, with seances, with sacrifices, but you actually apply physical cause and effect. You inject chemicals in people's bloodstream, you put a mask over people's faces and they breathe certain gases. If I were a patient undergoing surgery and needed general anesthesia, my consciousness would be turned off. I would very much like for it to stay off while I'm open on the operating table. I would very much like for it to come back when the operation is done. I sure hope you don't treat all of that as a miracle. I sure hope you don't say prayers. I hope you don't make sacrifices. I hope you control the mixture of gases and the timing and treat it as a matter of cause and effect. Please say yes. If you say no, I'm going to have my surgery done at Mass General, not Beth Israel Deaconess.
Well, I think we're coming from two different contexts. That's why I said probably in the Western religions, the word miracle is being used for lack of words. Because I already kind of excuse myself saying I'm uncivilized. Miracle is a way of duping people. I'm not talking about the word miracle in that context, that's why I said there's a different way to look at life. If you look at everything as logical steps, our logical steps progress with whatever data we have. Nobody can claim they have data about everything that's life and the whole phenomena of creation. Nobody has. Neither the religious people nor the men of science know where the existence or the cosmos begins and where it ends. Nobody knows. Hello? Nobody knows. But somebody is bombastic enough to explain it all happened because of one person up there, another is trying to piece it together, piece by piece. But how many pieces ever you gather? Because today modern science is recognizing this is an ever-expanding universe. If it's an ever-expanding universe, it doesn't matter how many pieces of the jigsaw you collect, you still don't have a full picture. So in that context, I'm saying we go as far as our logic and our data takes us. From there is a blind spot which we do not know, we just hope it happens. And sometimes we have found if you do certain things happen. Sometimes it doesn't happen. But the important thing is using the word miracle as a way to fool people to believe things and working through a logical process for all the phenomenal activity that we do in the world, there is no contest about that, there is no any difference about that. But coming to the consciousness, once again I would like to distinguish your awareness of yourself right now and consciousness are two different entities altogether. Your awareness is definitely a consequence of all the things that are happening in the brain. I've not looked because I don't have one, I'm only experiencing it through other people. So, I do not know all that, but definitely it's a consequence of what's happening. Things are firing up, we know. I may not know exactly where, how it's firing up, I know things are fired up within us, which is creating a certain awareness. So, this awareness is a consequence of activity, not just the brain, I wouldn't go with that. I think there is a brain right across. From your toes to your head, everywhere there is different levels of brain. I don't want to call it brain, we call this mental body. There is memory and there is intelligence right across. So, only if all this fires up, then you have an experience of life. How much it fires up will determine how profound an experience of life you have. This is a different aspect. We're talking about consciousness. That is not exactly an appropriate word in English language because that's the only word we have as far as I know. Normally we call this chitta. Chitta means an intelligence without memory, it has no intent. But you can create any intent for it. With the same life energy, somebody will do evil things. With the same life energy, somebody will do wonderful things. Because it has no intent, it's simply there, it empowers you whichever way. Let's say it's like electricity, you can make sound out of it, you can make light out of it, you can make whatever you want out of it. Just like that, the fundamental force which drives us has no intent. So, when we say consciousness, we are referring to that aspect of intelligence which has no intent because it has no memory. But if you give it memory, it will immediately gain an intent and a direction.
Intriguingly, the divergence in perspectives on consciousness between Steven Pinker and Sadhguru can be likened to a dialogue between a physicist and a musician discussing the essence of music. The physicist deconstructs music into its elemental parts, frequencies, and waves, unraveling the scientific fabric that orchestrates harmony. Meanwhile, the musician delves into the soul of music, speaking of song structures and the profound personal experience evoked by melodies. One perspective illuminates with precision and rationality, while the other captivates with emotional depth and experiential wisdom. Both views, equally important, weave together a more comprehensive understanding of the consciousness.
Finally, one more observation. I think that there is a way to make sense of the question of, is, say, consciousness distributed through the body, or does it consist of brain activity? I think the answer is brain activity. And we can actually imagine the circumstances that tease them apart. I mean, when someone steps on my toe, I feel the pain in my toe, but there's every reason to think that what is happening is a pattern of activity in my brain. I localize it in my toe.
Everything that we perceive through five sense organs, of course, it is processed in the brain, which is not just today's understanding, it's always been so in most parts of the world. And the brain that we're talking about, where was it manufactured? It was manufactured in this body, by this body. We did not buy it or import it from somewhere. It was made from this body. It didn't come to us from elsewhere. So the evolution of the brain within the individual human being happened in this body. So essentially, the way we look at this is, we don't look at brain as something different, it is just body with a different levels of functionality. Significant levels of functionality. A whole lot of people may be walking around this university without their brains functioning, but their livers, kidneys and hearts are functioning. Without that, they wouldn't be walking. So, I'm not questioning whether the brain is significant in doing all these processes, no question at all about that. But is it the be-all of everything? No, because there are still so many aspects of life which are unexplained. So someday when we have the data, we will explain. But you can gather data only about physical aspects of life. So essentially, if we have concluded that the whole existence is just physical, well, today morning we were talking to all the physicists, they're all talking about over 90% or 99% of everything seems to be empty, it is not physical. So this, in the yogic culture, we look at it this way, we see that everything was nothing. It was called Shiva, that means it was that which is not. This that which is not went into a ripple because of a certain influence of energy, and once it went into a ripple, it gathers memory. Once it gathers memory, it finds an intent and a direction. From this various miraculous levels of… I'm using that word very consciously, miraculous levels of multiple millions and millions of forms of creation happened. Just the life on this planet is so absolutely mind-boggling that the numbers and the variety of life that's happened, if you look at the whole cosmos, we don't even know what is what. So, this happened and this is still functioning in every bit of life, in everything. Even in a single atom, over 99% is supposed to be, or 93 or 94% is supposed to be empty. What is this emptiness? So, this is what we refer to as consciousness, which is the basis of everything. Well, you can define it as space, you can call it as nothingness, you can call it as dark matter or dark energy, whatever, but essentially it is that which is not. When we say that which is not, it is not physical in nature, which is fundamental to all physical creation. So, can we explain this logically? Yes, to a certain point we can. Maybe all the way we can, but explanation and reality are two different things. We can always explain everything. We can always explain the whole phenomena of human life, But the reality of human life is totally different, it's experienced by different people in different ways. Let's say there are two siblings, same genetic material, same home, same school, but they don't function the same way because the way they receive, the way they process is different. Well, that is not what we're talking about, but the important thing to understand is human experience is coming not necessarily only from the brain activity, but to what extent do we delve into that aspect of life which has no information but has intelligence. When this intelligence fires, suddenly human beings do things that other people never thought is possible. That's when people think it's miraculous. I am not using the word miracle in the religious context of saying, I did something like that and it happened, not in that context, but something that you cannot find logical explanation because, as you said, what is that, God gap, is it? What was the… Huh? God of the gaps. No, we are not talking about God of the gaps either. The gaps are there because of ignorance that we know, but there are dimensions of life which are not physical in nature. What is not physical in nature, neither can you define nor describe nor perceive through five senses. Right now, everything that we know is through five senses. What is wrong with five senses? Nothing wrong. It is just that for different creatures, these senses are different. What is light for you, for a whole lot of creatures, it is darkness. What is darkness for you is light for them. Because the sense organs are designed as it is necessary for our survival process. Based on your survival requirement, accordingly it is designed. So what you see, what a grasshopper sees, what a dragonfly sees are very different because these sense organs are designed for our survival process. And our survival process may be very different from one creature to another. In that context, what we call as brain is just that receptive process or that reception place where it receives all these impulses from senses. To what extent means in a day, even if you walk around the place unconsciously or reasonably unconsciously, still you're receiving, millions of gigabytes of memory going into your system, and all this is being stored, processed, whatever. In some minds it may be well done, in some minds it may be randomly done, but it is all being recorded, nobody is missing it. So, this process is a tremendous process for the brain to handle. But the fundamental existence of who we are, is it only because of brain-derived neurological activity or electrical makeup of things? That would be believing in a miracle.
We have our five senses, each one of which relies on a ingenious little bit of tissue that converts physical energy into neural impulses. And we might have more than five senses depending on how you count. But what we don't have, and this is also relevant to whether consciousness is a miracle, is extrasensory perception, ESP, that is access to states of the world not mediated through some physical transmission of signals. ESP often held to comprise telekinesis, the ability to move objects or cause physical changes through brain power, clairvoyance, the ability to sense the state of the world without any causal chain of transmission of information, precognition, the ability to foresee the future, and telepathy, the ability to sense other people's thoughts. And there is a lively tradition going back millennia of believing that ESP exists, and we know it doesn't exist. I mean, if we know anything, that every attempt to demonstrate one of the varieties of extrasensory perception has been shown to be overinterpretation of coincidences interpreted post hoc. You remember the hits, you bury all of the misses and false alarms. Sometimes actual fraud and flim-flam, as in the self-designated clairvoyants who turn out just to use cheap stage magic. They often fool the physicists because physicists are as foolable by stage magic as anyone else. The ones they don't fool are fellow magicians who can easily expose the tricks. The fact that there is no ESP, one more bit of evidence is we have never, all it would take is a tiny bit of statistical precognition. You don't even need to foresee events exactly, but just beyond the base rate probabilities, and you could get arbitrarily rich in the futures market. You could short or long, Bitcoin or Tesla stocks, and if you could really see if someone somewhere out there could really see the future, they'd be the richest person on earth, because it would not take very much predictive power to outsmart the rest of the market. No such person exists. More evidence that consciousness is not a miracle, that the senses really are the only way in which we can derive information about empirical reality. If someone were to show that ESP existed, I would have to revise a lot of my beliefs about the nature of consciousness and mental activity.
We are in no way referring to such things like ESP or magical ways of knowing things, no. I'm talking about the fundamental existence of who we are. Do we exist? I think in most human beings' experience, unless they're lost in their logic, if you simply sit here, you know you exist. So, this knowing that I exist is not a derivative of neuronal or electrical activity in the brain alone. Even beyond that we exist, because there are states where all this can come down to almost nothing, and still you exist, actually you exist much more. I'm hearing a lot of experiments going on with hallucinogenics and mushrooms and stuff in the universities, not by the students, by the professors. So, they are saying that when they have these spectacular experiences, the brain activity has actually come down, not gone up, as everybody would have believed. So, there are states. See, one important thing is, we should not conclude, especially science should never conclude what we do not know cannot exist. That'll not be a good thing to do.
Yes, but nor should we make up stuff for which we have no reason to believe it exists.
Someday, I think, the scientists must invest enough time to study these things, not with the attitude of proving or disproving it, but just by looking at it. Just simply looking at it without making conclusions, because conclusions are coming from what present things that we know, what data that we have. The very fundamental of science is that whatever we know right now is not everything. That is the fundamental of science we are seeking. Because seeking comes from the most fundamental realization that we do not know, that's why we are seeking. Seeking is genuine only if we see, I do not know. If I'm seeking this or that, I already know it is there, I'm looking for confirmation, that's not seeking, we're just making it up. So, essentially, it is very important if these two disciplines have to meet. It's because these two disciplines meeting is very important for human well-being. Just we thinking that improving the economies of the world, which is wonderful, changing the social structures of the world, which is fantastic, providing medical care, this, that, everything is fantastic, but still, human beings will still not attain to any sense of fulfillment or fullness of experience of life unless they turn inward. This turning inward is not about watching the electrical processes in my brain, it is about looking at something far more fundamental within myself. If we conclude that there is nothing more fundamental apart from electricity, well, then a light bulb lights up, that's enlightenment.
This debate has been incredibly enlightening. It's important to note that our intention is not to cast either of the esteemed speakers in the roles of heroes or villains. There's much to learn from both perspectives, offering our viewers a rich variety of insights. However, one point of constructive critique emerges from this debate. It's somewhat disappointing that Dr. Steven Pinker did not explore or even express curiosity towards the potential of exploring consciousness by looking inward. Exploring such possibilities could add a valuable dimension to our understanding of consciousness.